Well, my dear friends, today I am going to deal with uh, a topic from the Kite Runners by Khalid Husseini. Well, I have given this topic, consider the Kite Runner as a Bildungsroman, as a specimen of the Bildungsroman. A Bildungsroman or formation novel or maturation novel is basically it's a kind of coming of age narrative, you know. Maturation novel or formation novel, obviously, how the character of a particular person is formed, how his personality or her personality is formed, how the experiences of life teach him or her to become a mature individual who has to learn certain bitter lessons and also is nursed and nourished by the positive forces of life, the friends, family, and such others. So, if you read the Kite Runner, you will see that this is basically a story of Amir Aga, the protagonist, the young protagonist of the novel. The narrative begins not at the beginning, but more than halfway through. In literary parlance, it is called in medias res, just as the epic narratives also begin, Now, in this case, the novel begins with this one. Hello? আমি একটু একটা করছি, রেকর্ডিং করছি, পরে well, the novel begins when Amir Aga is already settled in the United States. He is married. His father has passed away. He is a successful writer. Then he receives a phone call, a kind of a blast from the past, like a bolt from the blue. Rahim Khan, his father's friend, calls him over the phone and tells him to come to Pakistan to atone for the past. Now, if we read the text, you will see that Amir's journey, if not the story journey, at least the plot journey begins there. And the entire childhood and growing up of Amir is recounted through flashbacks and also psychic projections, Sometimes he recalls the past and sometimes the past wells up in him. When he recalls the past, this is called a flashback. And when the past wells up in him, it is called a psychic projection. You see, Amir was born with the proverbial silver spoon in his mouth. He was the son of an aristocratic Afghan family, the son of a very famous businessman, in whose family there have been judges, politicians, and so on and so forth. On the mother's side also, Amir is basically highly placed because his mother, who died when he was very young and in childbirth actually, uh, his mother came from a royal family of Afghanistan. Sufia Akrami was herself very, very well educated and a university teacher. Now, we see there is, at the initial stage of Amir's life, an unproblematic phase when he is secure in the love of his father, even though his father often, if not directly, at least mentally, accuses him of being the cause for his mother's death. Anyway, but Amir is secure in the love of Ali, the caretaker. His very dear friend and follower, Hassan, Ali's son, apparently. His identity, that is Hassan's identity, we will talk about later, as I have already done while discussing the plot outline. And then Rahim Khan is also there, his father's friend. He is also a friend to this motherless child. And Amir actually grows up in an exclusively all-male setup. Amir himself actually refers to this quite a number of times. Then comes the problematic stage. The problematic phase in Amir's life is basically the offshoot of a very painful incident when Hassan is raped by the sociopath bad boy of the locality, that is Asif. And Amir fails to do something, to stand up for his friend. Now, Amir's remembrance of the sacred memory of his quote-unquote pure mother and his knowledge of the promiscuity of Hassan's mother, Sanawar. This actually leads to a further complication in Amir's mental growth. But then we'll see that the fact that he has not been able to stand up against the bully Asif and save, or at least try to save his friend Hassan, it leads to a phase of recrimination and pangs of conscience. He is tortured by his guilt or feeling of his guilt, but at the same time he wants to recriminate Hassan, whom he very perversely holds responsible for his own unease, restlessness, and remorse. Ultimately, the breakup from his friend Hassan also brings some kind of melancholy in the life of Hassan. But this particular phase is interrupted by the Soviet invasion and their flight from Afghanistan. Now, this actually is a very, very significant phase in the development of Amir, because this flight for the first time shows him the bitter facts of life: poverty, insecurity, uncertainty, dependence on charity, all these things, and dislocation. All these things actually problematize the growth, formation, and maturation of Amir. But then, once in America, he is forced to realize that he is no longer the blue-eyed boy of a rich father. He has to earn his living. In fact, they both have to earn their living. They collaborate. They go to second-hand sales and then set up their own booth in the flea market of second-hand and third-hand goods. This actually helps Amir in shedding some of his tantrums and emotional aimlessness. Now, if on the one hand, Amir's maturation is caused by the diagnosis of his father's cancer, then on the other hand, it is also influenced by Amir falling in love with General Toheri's daughter Suraya. Now, as I have already told you, Amir has been brought up in an all-male setup. As a result, this coming of the girl in his life means a topsy-turving of his own mental makeup. Amir, for the first time, learns to forgive and forget when he can ignore Suraya's past elopement and sexual intimacy with another male in Suraya's past. Now, this in a way helps Amir to overcome many of his mistaken notions. How love helps someone to accept someone else with all his or her faults or shortcomings. Now, this in a way helps Amir to at least live with his past. But this apparent equilibrium is broken by Rahim Khan's phone call. Ultimately, he comes to know from Rahim Khan that Hassan was his half-brother, and Hassan had laid down his life in defense of their property, their rights. This actually helps Amir in becoming a mature human being, which is why he can decide to risk his own safety and go up to Afghanistan in search of Shohrab, Hassan's orphaned son. Now, under the cares and torture of Asif and his associates. By standing up to Asif for Shohrab, Hassan's son, ultimately Amir is enabled to look himself straight in the face. And ultimately, when he goes away from the trouble-torn countries of Afghanistan and to some extent even Pakistan to the proverbial safe haven of the United States of America. Ultimately, he realizes that in the case of in the case of Shohrab, he has got a very important responsibility to fulfill as he is the Shohrab's only living relative and an uncle at that. By fighting Asif, by being knocked about seriously, he atones for his past indifference and callousness and thereby achieves or acquires the maturity that ultimately helps him to shout to the morose Shohrab while going to run for the kite for you 1,000 times. Okay, friends, this was in a nutshell my discussion of the Kite Runner as a Bildungsroman. It is